All right, it's just past the top of the hour. Thank you again for joining us for our next webinar in a continuing series from Public Spend Forum. I'm going to turn it over to Raj Sharma, who's going to be hosting our session for today. Thanks, Raj.
Great, thank you, Frank, and welcome everyone to another one of our webinars on markets and how to buy from different markets. So today, excited to cover a topic in a market that we've been diving a little bit deeper into, which is the market for immersive technologies, or as we've labeled here, augmented reality and virtual reality. And our expert here will explain all of those terms in a little bit. So we're excited to dive deep in. We've just recently also had an event with Amazon on this topic, where we had a number of demonstrations, and that also Nirav Desai, who's with us today, helped organize. So let's just jump in. Before we get started, I do want to acknowledge our sponsor, Ivalua. You all may have heard of Ivalua as the e-procurement or sourcing platform, empowerment platform that's being used by private sector as well as government agencies all over the country as well as all over the world. So a number of recent public sector wins. So congratulations to Ivalua, Maryland in my home state, and most recent one. So it's great to see. So check it out. Check out their website at ivalua.com. And thank you to our friends at Ivalua. So today, as you may know, I'm the CEO and founder of Public Spend Forum, and as in my role, I'm excited to facilitate a number of these conversations and really learn from a lot of leaders and experts out there. So today we have Nirav Desai, who's the CEO of Moonbeam, a company that we'll learn a bit more about in a second. Welcome, Nirav.
Hi, Raj. Great to talk to you. Great,
and I believe, Nirav, you're joining us from Seattle?
Yep, sunny Seattle at the moment.
Great, that's great. So Nirav, we'll do more of an introduction on Nirav in a second. So before we do that, I just wanted to tell you a little bit about Public Spend Forum, what we're doing just in 1 minute. As you may know, Public Spend Forum is a platform for market intelligence and best practices for public procurement globally. So we've got a very large community of tens of thousands of people and growing. And so we also rolled out a product called GovShop, which is a supplier research platform. So I'd encourage you to go to govshop.com, check it out. We actually have a page on immersive technology or augmented and virtual reality, where we have a number of companies. Right now it says here on this slide 228. So you can go to GovShop and see what companies are in there, but we'll continue to build that out. So please check that out and tell your colleagues about it. So with that, let me just go ahead and jump into the topic of the day today. As I said, we'll be learning a lot about immersive technologies, which includes augmented and virtual realities and mixed reality. And so we have today here with us, I believe, one of the foremost experts in this area, Nirav Desai, who's a CEO of Moonbeam, a company that he founded that's really helping a lot of agencies as well as private sector companies and really applying innovation through data science, AI, et cetera. Before that, Nirav and I actually have some common thread here in terms of careers. We both worked at Booz Allen. And Nirav was at Booz Allen, where he led a number of interesting initiatives, including the Ventures Group. So Nirav, again, welcome, and I'd like to just hand it over. And if you'd like to add something else about your background, and just tell us, what we'll be covering today.
Sure. So thanks, Raj. A little bit on my background. I had the opportunity to work with a number of agencies, a number of commercial sector clients as well, kind of helping draft a outlook on where they stand, what investment they can make on emerging technologies, and started specializing probably about 4 or 5 years ago on immersive tech, seeing that as a new way to interact with computing devices. And I'll get more into that a little bit further down. The key relevance here, though, is that through that platform I had at Booz Allen in the Futures Group, I really got an opportunity to see kind of what a variety of tech creators, investors, and funding agencies were looking at, and map out kind of barriers to adoption and technology that fed into other technologies to make to open up avenues of augmenting the way we work.
Great, great. Well, and I'm sure I know the team, some of the people at the on that team there. So I know they're doing a lot of interesting work. And we, of course, Nirav, just recently had the opportunity to work together and partner with Amazon Web Services, AWS, to host an event and have a number of companies there that presented some of their technologies. I think a couple of them are on today as well on this webinar, so we'll send that information out. But let me just jump ahead then. Nirav, tell us what we'll be covering today, and as you go through a number of these slides, I find it really fascinating learning about some of this.
Sure. So I wanted to cover a few topics here, and the way I'll do it, I'll start this out with kind of just setting the context. What is augmented and virtual reality? What is the technology capable of, both now and then I want to get a little bit more into the government sector. What are the use cases that really make sense for the government? What's the low-hanging fruit, and what's the long-term benefit? Mm-hmm. And then I'll go in detail with a number of use cases, really highlighting some of the technology that enables that, of the roadmap I was talking about. Lay out kind of the solutions landscape. Who are the key hardware providers? Who are the key platform vendors? How's content with peripherals being developed? And then I'll just wrap up with some key takeaways.
Great. So you tell me when, as we go through this, when to flip over to the next slide, and I'll just follow your lead.
Sounds good. We can move on now from.
Sorry. I was trying, I'm having a little technical difficulty. Here we go.
No problem. So real quick, and we talked a little bit about my background. I wanted to highlight a little bit about what Moonbeam does, and really, it is a platform for using to help with tech scouting. As you're looking for technology, as you're looking for really niche research-backed capabilities, I'd like corporations to get to a build versus buy perspective. How much energy does it take to put, and cost does it take to build a capability that's needed versus working with a startup, working with a research group, and buy that, incorporate that into your platform. Those are the tools that Moonbeam helps create. We have two products, Exchange, which is a data science product that helps find the right partners to work with based on government data and government research spend, as well as data from incubators, accelerators, economic development units. We have a database of over 1 million companies with deep tech capabilities. And Engage is really building the tools to help socialize and build a relationship with the founders, talk through business strategy, do design thinking sessions, and really immersive lean canvas type sessions to figure out whether that's the company you really want to work with. Next slide. So let's get to the topic at hand. And I always like to start with this slide because it's really this revolutionary. Since the dawn of humanity, we've been thinking in 3 dimensions, working in 3 dimensions, but when we get to communication, we drop down to 2 dimensions. As far back as the cave drawings to the printing press to HTML to academic papers. When we collaborate, the mode of collaboration is 2 dimensions. This is the first time in human history that at scale, we can actually collaborate in 3 dimensions. No longer do we have to just look at a flat image, but we can actually get the depth of of our creativity and present it out on paper. Now, that's what this will mean. Next slide. How do we embrace that? Now, when you think about, and it's about augmenting our creativity. We already, at this point, have a library in our pocket at all times. That is the augmentation that the web created and the mobile devices created. Now imagine that being spatially aware, relevant to your context, and presented to you in an intuitive, natural, and pervasive manner. Virtual reality is a lot more than gaming. It's a new way of interacting with their computing devices. Next slide. So let me define a few terms here because they're going to come up a lot, and it runs the gamut. So I'm sure most of the audience has heard of augmented and virtual reality as two terms. Mixed reality gets thrown out a lot. There's also some terms like augmented virtuality and, of course, reality. So if you think of this as a spectrum, on the far left, the blue, is reality. You know, that's us walking around the world, looking out our window. The far right is virtual reality. So that is a virtual world. I may be in my living room, but as far as I can see and feel, I am fixing the Millennium Falcon. I am in an alternate universe. I am doing things I would have never done before. Now, the middle ground between that is really where it gets interesting. So augmented reality generally is what we think about with using a mobile device to be able to see depth in the world. This is Pokemon Go. This is a retail application where you can see the shoe you may purchase in 3D. Mixed reality is kind of that mix in between, where I am, and often these are like head-mounted displays, the HoloLens or Magic Leap, where I am able to see 3D objects in this world around me without a handset, and they're actually interacting with the space around me. So I could see a virtual pet on my floor, and I could actually pet it. I wouldn't feel it, but I would, it would be able to sense the depth of my hand, and I'd be able to interact with these virtual objects. Now, augmented virtuality is kind of a newer term, and that's kind of flipping it up a little bit, where you're using real world objects to augment your virtual experience. So I could bring my hands into a virtual reality experience, but I could also bring objects I might want to work with. So let's say we're having a virtual collaborative session. I could bring in a product we're talking about or a whiteboard that we're working together on. That's augmented virtuality. Raj, is that clear? Can I get into any more details on this? I just want to kind of set the groundwork.
Yeah, no, I think that was great. That definitely helped me understand a bit more, and also I think the examples are great. So I think it'll make it more real. It would be good as we progress through some use cases, if you're able to kind of talk through that as well.
Sure.
In government, and I know there's a number of slides on that later on. So. Yep.
I just wanted to say that there's not a AR versus VR debate here. It's a spectrum that we live on, and depending on the use case, you'll want to apply a different level of enhanced environment versus digital environment.
Great. So next slide.
Yep. Buzzword bingo here. You hear these buzzwords all the time, and I wanted to provide a quick rubric by which you can kind of apply these technologies into what's coming out. So we're on the precipice of an immersive transformation. Right now, we see VR as kind of taking as, headsets are actually being sold. A number of games are being developed and are being used, and they're getting pretty cheap. Augmented and mixed reality will come next. There are some devices out there, again, the Magic Leap, the HoloLens. Those are really fueled by computer vision, machine intelligence, machine learning, AI. Augmented reality doesn't exist without AI. You have to, the amount of intelligence that goes into the way our eyes function and the way we spatially map our environment, we have to be able to replicate a good chunk of that and make augmented reality possible. Further, the interface changes. So you want natural language processing. You want the ability to understand audio quite effectively, voice, and that has to be built into a mixed reality experience. When AR and VR comes together in that spectrum I described, that's really immersive tech. And then on top of that, you add a number of, particularly for enterprise use cases, wearables. For an enhanced or a digital soldier, you'd want to know their biometrics while they're using these devices. There are actually brain-computer interfaces that are being developed that help track when you may be getting sleepy. That can be applied to an augmented reality use case for a long-haul trucker. Chatbots, avatars, the ability to interact with virtual characters for simple tasks. Imagine real estate, virtual real estate, where you actually have a virtual real estate agent, same way you do for a chatbot when you're booking a flight. This immersive transformation really brings logic to that buzzword bingo that we live in.
Mm-hmm. That's great, and I was gonna just suggest to the audience and the people that are joining, just ask questions. We'll bring those up as we go. So please definitely feel free to kind of chat something to us, so we can keep this as interactive as possible in this format. So, but yeah, I really like this slide here. I think it and also kind of the progression here that you show, kind of where this is all headed.
Thanks. Yeah, I tried to highlight the orange ones as the ones that are like most relevant in this transformation, but there's some interesting people doing work around telepresence drones as well. So it really goes across all elements of computing.
Great.
Next. Yeah.
Oops, I think I missed a slide. There you go.
Oh. So again, I keep making the case on this transformation, but if you think through the history of computing, with every wave, there have been market movers, really key companies that drive that transformation. There's been a killer app that really drives adoption, and there's been key activities human activities that are effectively outsourced to the computing device. So the first wave, it was really the mainframes and personal computing, or mainframes really. So when we IBM, Texas Instruments, Motorola, they were the big companies in the field. And the power that computing provided was the programming language, the ability to have a structured instruction and have that executed without fail, without flaw. As long as the algorithm was right, you would get the right result. It effectively mechanized computation. Wave 2 is really where we started getting into more creative processes. Word processing and spreadsheets, content creation. It was really about being able to mass produce and making the way we create artifacts faster. Desktop publishing. This is where Microsoft, Apple, Intel, and others like Adobe and other content providing companies really got their start. The third wave, which is kind of where we are squarely right now, and dealing with repercussions of, is a combination of social media, the connectivity you get from that, the web, and mobile. The fact that we have compute on us everywhere we go. Google, Facebook, Amazon are the movers that came out of this, and research was outsourced. We have a library in our pocket. And it's bigger than any library I went to as a kid. This wave is the immersive transformation. We don't know who's going to be the winners here. It's kind of the dawn of a new age. It's kind of where, similar to where the web was in 1993, 94. But I think based on what I'm seeing, the key activity that we're going to outsource is decision support. We are already doing research, but the question is, how do you curate that and make that context relevant and really give you the information you need to make a decision? Essentially, we're the general, and the computing device is our action officer, bringing together the intel to help us make a decision. Raj, is that a helpful context?
Yes, I think so. I think as we proceed here, you know, I'm just curious about how you know, what you're seeing relative to these different waves in terms of the use cases. So I know the next slide here starts to cover kind of what's going on in government then, and types of use cases you're starting to see here.
Yeah, so let's get out of the background now. Let's get into the actual the details here. There are currently 58 open solicitations for immersive tech, and number of agencies. This is not a comprehensive list of all the agencies. There was over $540 million in government awards last year. A lot of that was done through OTA, so other transactional authorities. And a lot of prototype pilots are being funded to figure out how to best apply this technology into the different agencies. I work with, I've been a speaker in an event called the Virtual World Forum. Usually gets together about 30 to 40, the invitational list is over 50 agencies, but there's usually about 25 to 30 maybe 40 agencies that are represented there. They meet every 6 months or so to get up to date on the latest developments in XR or immersive tech. And there are loads of pilots. Very few systems of records. So the large procurements are not out yet. Okay. But you can think about training, maintenance, and I'll get into, let's go on the next slide. I'll get into a little bit more of the use cases and low-hanging fruit.
Yeah, and I'd be curious, Nirav, as you proceed, you know, where do you see the most progress, whether it's use cases or in terms of agencies as well as
sure.
Whether it's federal government or other agencies.
Yeah.
So I'm going to mute my audio here as I hear some sirens in the background.
Okay. All right, so the four, I guess, lowest hanging fruit use cases, and the agencies that will need this will be tied to the use case. Really training, maintenance, planning, and therapeutics. Now, training is right now by far the biggest, and it's the value proposition is pretty straightforward. Why jump out of the plane for the first time? Learn to jump out of a plane by jumping out of a plane. One of the first applications we put together for when I was at Booth was a jump master trainer. So really going through the safety procedures of jumping for a paratrooper and a jump master, kind of working out that interaction to make sure that before a soldier ever gets on a plane, they know all the safety procedures, they know the checklist, they have built the muscle memory around how to properly jump out of the plane before they ever do that. Now, any kind of precision work that has a limited tolerance for failure, virtual training can be pretty effective. The other benefit really of virtual VR training is that you can test for scenarios that you would never want to actually exercise on in real life. How do you train around a fire or a bomb threat or you know, a malfunctioning vehicle? All of these can be simulated in virtual reality well before they're ever done in without putting anyone at risk. Second is equipment availability. You can duplicate training and send it out to the field much more cost effectively than either sending out physical trainers or actually training on actual equipment. Now, this doesn't give you a 100% solution. You'll clearly want to train on actual equipment, but a lot of the basic getting to know the equipment, understand the operations, understanding where all the controls are, and building up some of that muscle memory can be done virtually. Maintenance is another big area, and this is really taking the you think about an electronic technical working document or a maintenance procedure card. It would be great if those were 3D. I mean, the equipment that's being repaired, that's being worked on, is three-dimensional. And depending on how you see what angle you see it from, it's hard to, there's a certain amount of expertise that one gains from just experience with this equipment. Augmented reality allows you to, one, have the models be in 3D, two, let the journeymen and the experts really capture their knowledge and share it with apprentices, whether they're there or not. And third, you can call in remote expertise. So the ability to let an expert who's on call or an engineer back at the engineering shop see what's happening within a float vessel. Very powerful. The third use case is planning. And that really, I mean, we still deal with blueprints. We're starting to move into CAD drawings, and architecture has really taken a hold of virtual reality to plan out building constructions. Now let's expand that a little bit out to, Department of Transportation projects approving major construction. How can you model that and see how that affects a variety of things from traffic patterns to civic safety? Well, you can. Further, I've seen some use cases. Actually, one of the first ones I built on the HoloLens was taking MRI data, medical images, reconstituting that into the 3D model of the organ, so that physicians can collaborate on the diagnosis and the appropriate surgical path forward. And then virtual meetings. So there's a number of ways that planning can be enhanced through virtual reality. And lastly, therapeutics. This is, and I kind of structured these in order of readiness for how ready the technology is. There are a number of therapeutics out there. There's a lot of being done actually by the VA around pain management. Trigger therapy, so helping address post-traumatic stress. There has been some work looked into on whether telepresence or virtual travel can help with Alzheimer's. Again, and this requires a lot of clinical trials and research and study behind, but pain management has basically proven to work. Distraction therapy is effective, and it's actually decreasing the amount of opioid consumption on patients that are using VR for pain management. And I'll get more into these a little bit. Raj, you want to go to the next slide? Raj, can you go to the next slide?
Sorry about that. I was
no
on mute as I was talking here. I was just going to say, Nirav, that on the previous slide, that so you mentioned kind of there's a lot more going on in training. Just curious. I guess maybe the next couple of slides, maybe I should hold my question might cover this in terms of where do you see other areas developing faster than, say, in addition to training?
Yeah, so let me answer that on the next slide.
Okay.
So training right now is an obvious use case, but as the technology matures, as people get more used to it, a number of use cases are going to open up, and then we're going to go up to planning and then frontline operations. So with that, the agencies that use this technology it's going to expand. So we've already started to see architecture embrace this technology for planning. We are starting to see DARPA and AFRL research being funded around next generation operation centers, which would involve holography. So if you track some of the early research agencies, they're starting to look at some of these advanced use cases. And then as the devices get smaller, they're more able and more rugged. They're more able to be used in the field for frontline use cases. So right now, while augmented maintenance can be done in a pretty controlled environment, how do you what about having augmented reality headsets on TSA agents so that they're aware of they can actually see the findings of the biologic or the metal detector on their heads-up display. Those type of use cases will come down the line. Clearly, with that comes a lot of the issues around privacy and maintenance of data. But as the technology becomes more available, more miniaturized, it'll be expanded into other agencies. So I'll go use case by use case and kind of map out the barriers and what opportunities open up for each of these three broad areas. Right now, training, as I said, is the biggest focus area. Again, we're looking at equipment or activities that are hazardous, where equipment's too expensive or unavailable. That's really the sweet spot for training. And also it's inherently spatial. Now, as we have an AR cloud, that's an augmented reality cloud where objects can be shared in space across users, mapped to physical locations. As the tools and platforms extend, as there's more sensory input, so haptics, the ability to feel objects, the ability to have spatial audio to understand kind of, to be able to hear as though you're there, you're going to enable a lot more in terms of going from training to exercises potentially, to kind of mapping out that physical, that virtual to physical training spectrum. So as an example, one of the, last year at Microsoft Build, we had a, back when I was at Booz, we had a demonstration of a Homeland Security type use case where we're using virtual reality to train security personnel on how to protect a stadium from a drone attack. That was fully virtual, based on using some equipment, the Drone Buster, that's actually rolled out for those type of use cases. We had mounted cameras to demonstrate how you can have mounted remote object detection through computer vision. And then that was actually pumped onto a HoloLens so that a security personnel at the stadium could actually have triggers superimposed on their line of sight from the computer vision to be able to see the drone at a farther distance. Right now, the way FAA handles that is they put essentially a drone ban within a 5-mile radius of a public event. As this technology matures, as we have more this kind of IoT integration of remote sensors, remote cameras, piped to a heads-up display, ideally people are more safe. I just wanted to go through a little bit more on that use case. Surgical trainers is another one. Number of companies are looking at how you can train orthopedics on complex surgeries with lesser use of cadavers. If you're doing first learning a knee replacement, you probably work through 15, 20 cadavers before you ever get on a actual patient. Well, you could virtually perform the same procedures, and maybe you could get that down to 1 or 2 cadavers and test for more unorthodox conditions. So they're more prepared doctors when they're actually working on patients. The Army is actually being kind of leading the way here. They're leading an effort around the synthetic training environment, and the term they're using is one world sim. So the idea is basically having a training environment that can be both virtual and supporting exercises, where you have a global terrain that can be mapped virtually. So you could virtually train in Nellis Air Force Base or Elmendorf up in Alaska. Or if you're actually there, you can have augmented exercise using the same data, the same assets, and the same scenarios, all working across multiple devices.
It's great. So Army's taken the lead there.
Yeah.
That's exciting. And I think what you talked about in terms of virtual surgery, et cetera, I can imagine that VA and obviously Defense Department kind of have massive need there. It's probably something I'm sure there's a lot of applications.
Yeah, and and so a lot of VA is putting a lot of money behind that, as well as a lot of actual independent hospitals and medical groups. So that's coming both from the federal side and the private sector. Yeah.
Great.
We could go to the next slide. Now, planning is a little bit more.
I need to go back one. There you go. Okay.
Planning's a little bit more nebulous, and this is going to be more abstract because it's not quite there. I've shown a few pictures here. So there's a number of companies that are looking at, I would say this kind of grew out of the architecture space, architecture, engineering, construction. This company up in Calgary, George Environmental, that's actually allowing you to, for corporate furniture, you can actually send them a blueprint of your new building and custom order furniture based on those specifications, where you do a virtual walkthrough and they'll ship it out ready to go. That's kind of some of the early stage, looking at buildings before they're built, see what your potential condo the view might be. But it's starting to be applied now to GSA for new building construction, Milcon for base construction, and then one of the use cases I'm most proud of is a product we built at Booz called Ocean Lens, which is actually looking at data visualization to help plan submarine missions. Rather than looking at two-dimensional topographic maps, we created a Google Earth-like 3D visualization of the ocean floor. So you can actually drive through virtually different parts of the ocean and overlay various mission-related data on top of that. So sound propagation, or how salinity of the water or the currents affect the stealth of the submarine.
Mm-hmm.
Really map out the echoes and how that put approximate risk on the path you're choosing. Those are small, contained type environments, but as tools integrate, as photogrammetry. So photogrammetry is the ability to take structure out of photos or videogrammetry. So actually let the ability to have remote cameras in a deployed location that are able to generate a virtual object. So you can have, say, identify someone who may be trespassing on in a facility, warehouse, and actually see whether that's the maintenance staff or an actual criminal based on the movement patterns. And then voice integration is key, IoT cloud integration, so being able to share that kind of structure from data across the cloud. And that leads to an hokey example here. I have the picture of the Jurassic Park facility being virtualized to kind of find the assets on a campus. And then Avatar down below where you actually have the 3D operations center. So anyone who needs, whether it's operations center for the government, TSA or FAA flight space, understanding that, understanding space junk and mapping where that is, determining whether the motion of an object in space is Newtonian or Keplerian motion, and whether so is it space junk or is it a satellite? All of this can be done and visualized as this technology kind of integrates better with the cloud. And then remote collaboration. So if you can have an ops center, and I can virtually be there, you could bring decision makers instantly to where the data is being aggregated and where the experts are, rather than needing to fly everyone together at one place. So use cases with Homeland Security, FEMA, and of course the military.
Great, and then I think the next slide covers operations.
Yep.
I think there's a question here about related to, I think, so I'll just flip over to the next slide, and on operations as well. So the question, Nirav, is are agencies considering immersive technologies to lessen dependency on written procedures, et cetera? So, for example, the example the person gave is in accounting, a virtual teacher performing analysis. So using a virtual teacher to perform analysis, or I guess to help train as well. You could do both, right?
Yeah, so I haven't seen an accounting application. Not to say there won't be that online. I mean, part of the interesting thing here is gamification of learning is proven to be very effective to help people learn basic skills for language acquisition or even things like data science. That's starting to be applied now. I know the Army is looking at a pilot for gamifying a variety of training. There is a company that is looking at a lot of educational use cases for VR, dog head simulations, and they're doing virtual classrooms to enhance education. The benefit of that is it one, you could gamify it a little better. You could have better metrics on performance and that competitive nature that's inherent to humans. Whether I use Duolingo learning Portuguese right now, and I strive for those little stars. I love to hear that little bell, right? And that reinforcement just makes us learn a little bit better. and bringing that into an immersive experience even further that. I haven't seen any accounting use cases yet, but I have seen a number on the maintenance side for helping equipment maintainers. Really, the key thing they're trying to address is the aging workforce, and so knowledge management, knowledge transition. How do you capture the unwritten expertise of the journeyman or the technical expert and present that in a way that the youth is most ready to learn? So that's things like video and experiential learning. I don't know, I kind of went around that. I think I got to that answer.
Yeah, I think so. Hey, Nirav, just to kind of as a time check here, we're at about 2:45, 2:47. So we've, I just wanted to give you a heads up on that.
Okay, let me run through the last few slides, and then I'd love to have a little bit more conversation with anyone. Any questions, or Raj, if you have questions. So operations, real quick. This really comes out of training.
Previous slide.
So that first example on the left is a forklift operator. Raymond worked with Free Range Games to build one of the most immersive trainers out there. But it just shows that using heavy equipment in training, that actually had a progression path through robotics and AI to have telepresence drones. So the mining industry is actually looking into whether you can remotely operate the large mining equipment without putting any employees in danger. Telepresence conference rooms, being able to basically let you be on the front line without really needing to be there. And then human and machine interfaces to make it our response time quicker. That's kind of where we're going here. Agencies that are doing this are, again, a lot of the depots, a lot of the entities that have large fleets, a dispersed workforce. Telepresence, remote maintenance, all of that really works with fleet management type use cases. So Army, Navy, Air Force as well. Okay, next slide. So I've talked through a lot of use cases. I want to kind of give a quick slide on the landscape here. Up top, you have a number of the VR and AR headset manufacturers. That's kind of the core of where the industry right now is, and that's kind of where a lot of the big money is being spent. However, I think where things get interesting is on the bottom right, the engines and platform. We have frameworks for the web. We have React, and we have the Java environment, and a number of frameworks to make development easier. That hasn't been built yet in XR. That's kind of where we're starting. The game engines help, but on top of that, really managing shared spaces, that's being developed. On the left, you have a number of peripherals. So these peripherals can help enhance the experience for different use cases. So Tobii is a eye tracking software. So as you're in the VR experience, you can run analytics on where you're looking. Haptex is a really powerful virtual haptic glove, so you can actually feel virtual objects. And then there's various input devices like the HoloLight pen, Logitech has keyboards to make it possible to use external devices. Inverse is a really interesting one that allows you to track your cell phone. So basically, be able to use a smartphone in VR. So you can take all of your third wave applications and run them in VR. And then the solutions providers are really laying out a framework on top of which we'll build. And this landscape is forming. Raj, this is a helpful slide. I just wanted to kind of lay out
Yeah,
some of
I
the
mean,
players.
I think it's always good to see something like this, right?
Yep.
I think just to see kind of how you segment the market in terms of kind of different sets of capabilities out there,
Mhm.
and then see who the players are. And obviously, there'll always be some level of overlap, right? And no single company is going to be doing just one thing.
Yep.
So you definitely see that, yeah, no,
And you
yeah.
notice none of these guys are your traditional um, government solutions providers. So if you go to the next slide,
Hmm.
this is really um, how your traditional SIs are starting to stand up immersive groups that are um, providing some of these solutions on top of it. Um, Highlighted a few stories on some of these, and not clearly not advocating for any one or another. But they are starting to stand up divisions that are understanding these technologies, understanding that broader landscape, and bringing that to inform government use cases. Because truthfully, a lot of the industry, while the government is the largest buyer in the space, the industry kind of grew out of the gaming space, um, and video gamers just don't understand the government and some of the mission areas the way integrators do. So that translation process needs to be done.
Great. No, this is great too, just to understand kind of how some of the traditional players are kind of approaching this as well.
Yeah.
So, well, that's just great, and I think there's a couple more slides, right? And also for those on the line, please let us know if you have any questions, and we may have like 4 or 5 minutes to just answer any.
Yeah. So can we just go really quickly to the last slide, takeaway slides?
Yeah.
Um, I guess my three main points here is that this technology at a prototype level has shown value, and it represents a pretty major transformation that's going to take place in the next 5 to 10 years. Government's kind of leading that way in terms of the use case and the mission need. And thought needs to be put into how to make this intuitive, pervasive, and natural for the interfaces to really make sense. And while that's being done to address government needs, the workforce that's doing it doesn't completely understand the government. So for this to be effective, it needs to be both sides need to reach out to each other and understand the needs and where this is coming from. So it will require an active process.
Great. Well, it sounds like there's a lot going on. I mean, any other things in terms of Nirav? And obviously, it's still kind of developing, as you said, and there's no like massive kind of implementations, but a lot of pilots and things going on right now. Where if where is the most progression you see in terms of like just embrace of this within the government? I think you mentioned obviously for different use cases, right?
Yeah.
But if you were to just kind of think about it just broadly, where do you see this happening more? So if, whether you're, other government agencies and you want to go out and talk to other agencies, or if you're a vendor and you're trying to
Yeah.
understand the market, where
So
do you think are the biggest kind of opportunities?
So definitely the biggest, the Army is really doing the most in a consolidated manner in terms of really out of Central Florida, looking at how to leverage the investments in this technology across the whole Army. They led the OTA with Microsoft for the next generation HoloLens for tactile soldier headsets. But I would say a lot of the innovation labs. I actually had a interesting talk with a founder yesterday who just had a major exit, and the advice he gave me was to look at the leading indicator, not at revenue, and make decisions based on the leading indicators of where things are taking place, not on revenue, because revenue is the benefit, the fruit of what you've invested a year or two ago.
Mm-hmm,
So
mm-hmm.
if you think about the fact that there's not systems of record for immersive tech, the pilots that are being funded are the leading indicator. And those are being done out of the innovation labs. So the Beamer Lab, Battle Space Exploitation and Mixed Reality Lab down in San Diego, it's FAWAR, has some really great VR use cases that they're consolidating and making available. ComSub Pac has a lab out in Hawaii, Commander Submarine Forces Pacific. The Virtual World Forum is kind of looking at that cross-agency. NASA is doing some really interesting work to test out both planning, remote operations, robotics, and training. I would say those are the agencies that are really leaning forward on this. So that's Army, Navy, NASA, and then on the therapeutic side, VA is doing a lot through grants. So that's working with hospitals and running clinical trials. I would like to see more, probably on more of the depot level side, the maintainers. Some of the civil agencies, I think Department of Transportation, the FAA, there's clear areas where this technology can help, but I haven't seen as much activity there. And it might be that I just don't see that.
Yeah, I think that's a good one, right? And especially with at least just one example, right? Like we've heard a lot about pilot shortages as one of the number one things coming up in the future as the airline industry grows. So, so you could definitely see kind of some trends there. Well, I think we're just about out of time here. Let me see if any questions here. But I think I've posed a couple that came through. So Nirav, any parting thoughts here before we sign off?
No, Raj, I appreciate the time. It's a great conversation, and my contact information is up there. If people on the line want to reach out, feel free. And I'm happy to add any insight I can help with.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone. And thanks for joining again. We'll make this information available as always. And so we'll send it out, and feel free to reach out to Nirav and to us as well if you have any questions. And check out kind of some of the tech companies on our platform as well. So thank you, and we'll look forward to seeing you on another webinar. Thanks, and thanks, Nirav.
Thank you, Raj.